The hum of the spaceship's engine was the only sound that filled the cabin as it glided through the vast emptiness of space. The human explorer, Jake Carter, stared out the window, mesmerized by the swirling stars and distant planets. He had been traveling the galaxies for years, charting unknown territories and discovering strange new worlds, but none had been as intriguing as the one he was about to land on. Jake had come across the planet purely by accident. His ship had taken a minor detour while navigating through a nearby asteroid field. He had no intentions of stopping on the planet, but as fate would have it, the ship's autopilot decided otherwise, and he found himself descending toward its surface. The planet, despite its rugged terrain and barren appearance from space, seemed to hold an air of mystery. Something in the air felt different. The ship touched down gently on the dusty ground, the soft landing marking the start of something far more extraordinary than Jake could have anticipated. He had no real plans for this planet. It was simply a place to rest and perhaps explore briefly before continuing his journey. Little did he know, this world would change everything. Jake stepped out of the ship, his boots making a soft crunching sound on the dry earth beneath. The air was thin, but breathable, though it had a strange metallic taste to it. His surroundings were a stark contrast to the lush forests and oceans of Earth. There were rocky outcrops, jagged mountains far off in the distance, and a reddish-orange sky that made the place feel even more alien. He scanned the area, but there was no sign of life, until he heard a noise from behind him. A soft rustle broke the silence, followed by the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Jake turned to see a figure walking toward him. At first, he thought it might be some sort of indigenous creature. But as the figure came closer, he froze. Before him stood a being like nothing he had ever seen, a woman, but not human. She was tall, regal, her posture straight and commanding. Her skin had a pale blue hue, almost shimmering in the dim light of the planet's twin suns. Her features were sharp, yet elegant, with eyes that glowed softly like the stars themselves. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed to shimmer with an ethereal light. She was dressed in a flowing robe, not unlike the ceremonial garments Jake had seen in ancient Earth cultures, though far more intricate and alien in design. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had read about the advanced alien civilizations, but never expected to encounter one in his travels. He knew he was standing before someone important, someone powerful. His gaze traveled to her face, which was calm but unreadable. Then she stopped. The moment her eyes met his, she froze, like a statue. Jake's eyes widened in surprise. He had seen alien species in his travels, but none had reacted this way. It was as if the world itself had stopped. She stood there, perfectly still, her eyes locked on him. There was an undeniable tension in the air, a weight that made Jake feel uneasy. His mind raced. Was this a greeting, or was she unsure of what to make of him? For a few long moments, neither of them moved. Then, finally, she blinked. Once, twice, before stepping forward, though she still appeared distant, almost cautious. Her eyes never left his face, and she seemed to study him intently, as though trying to decipher something. "I did not expect you," she spoke, her voice smooth but laced with uncertainty. Her accent was foreign, but the words were clear. "You are human." Jake nodded, his mouth dry. "Yes, I didn't expect to land here. My ship had some malfunctions, and I wasn't intending to visit." The woman's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and she took another step toward him. "You are an explorer." Jake hesitated, wondering how much he should reveal. "Yes, I've been traveling through space, just trying to map uncharted regions." She regarded him for a moment, and then her lips curved into a faint smile, though there was something unsettling about it. "I see. Well, you are most fortunate that you arrived. We were not expecting visitors." Jake tried to shake off the eerie feeling. "I'm sorry if I've caused any trouble. I'll leave as soon as my ship's fixed." The woman's smile faded, and her gaze hardened for a brief second. But then she seemed to gather herself. You are not the first to arrive here, but you are the first in a long time. Jake couldn't help but feel that something was off. He had the distinct impression that this was no ordinary encounter. The way she looked at him, as though she were trying to piece together a puzzle. Something about it felt almost like recognition, but it made no sense. He was just an explorer, not anyone's special. Before Jake could voice another question, the woman's tone shifted. Come. The Queen wishes to meet you. Jake blinked in confusion. The Queen? Was this woman a leader of some kind? He followed her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The air seemed to grow heavier as they walked through the barren landscape. His mind buzzed with questions, but he held his tongue. There would be time for answers soon, he hoped. But as they continued, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something important was unfolding around him. Something that had to do with him. And that look in the woman's eyes when she first saw him. The way she froze in place, it haunted him. What was it? What was the real reason she reacted like that? He was about to find out. Jake followed the mysterious woman through the barren landscape, the red-orange sky casting an eerie glow over the rocky terrain. The journey felt longer than it should have, and he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The strange woman in front of him was silent now, her footsteps steady but purposeful. She led him toward what appeared to be a large stone structure in the distance, its towering spires reaching toward the sky, like the bones of some long-dead giant. Despite the silence, Jake's mind was racing. The way the woman had frozen when she saw him still weighed heavily on his thoughts. He had encountered alien species before, but this was different. She had been stunned, almost as if she recognized him. But how? He was just a human explorer, no different from any other who had traveled the stars. Was there something about him that triggered such a reaction? As they neared the structure, Jake saw that it was not just a building but a palace, massive and ancient-looking. The walls were carved with intricate symbols that he didn't understand. Alien glyphs. The very presence of the place filled him with awe, but also a slight sense of foreboding. The woman stopped in front of the large arched entrance, turning to face him. "You will wait here," she said softly, her tone neutral but firm. Jake nodded, his curiosity burning. "Who's inside?" "The Queen." She gave a slight nod but didn't speak further. Without another word, she turned and entered the building, leaving Jake standing alone outside. He watched as she disappeared into the shadows of the entrance, his heart pounding. The silence of the landscape around him felt suffocating now, as if the very air was holding its breath. He wanted answers. What was going on here? Why had the Queen reacted the way she had? The woman had been so calm when speaking to him, yet something in her eyes, a flicker of fear, made it clear that there was more to the story. Something was being hidden, and Jake was determined to uncover it. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Jake paced back and forth in front of the grand entrance, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Every so often, he glanced up at the sky, watching the two suns dip lower on the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape. He felt small, insignificant, lost in the vastness of this alien world. But the mystery that surrounded him burned brighter than his discomfort. Finally, the woman returned, her face unreadable as she stepped back into the open air. She motioned for Jake to follow. "Come," she said, "the Queen is ready to speak with you." Jake followed her without hesitation, stepping into the darkened halls of the palace. The interior was just as impressive as the outside. Massive stone walls, arched ceilings, and long corridors adorned with alien artwork. The air was thick with the smell of incense, and strange lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls. Everything felt surreal, like stepping into a dream. They walked deeper into the palace, passing through several chambers until they came to a large, ornate room. The Queen sat at the far end of the room, her back straight, and her gaze fixed on the entrance. As Jake entered, he could feel her presence before he even saw her clearly. It was as if the very air around her was charged with power. She was even more striking up close. Her pale blue skin shimmered faintly in the low light, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity. She wore a regal, flowing robe, but there was something cold in her demeanor, something that made Jake uneasy. She didn't smile or acknowledge his presence with a warm greeting. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly as they locked onto him, as though she was studying him in great detail. Jake stood still, unsure of what to do. There was an unspoken tension in the room that was palpable. The Queen said nothing at first, just gazing at him with an intensity that made him feel like he was under a microscope. Her eyes were filled with curiosity, yes, but also wariness. He couldn't help but notice the way her fingers twitched slightly, as though readying herself for something. "Human," she spoke finally, her voice cold but not unkind. "You are not what I expected." Jake didn't know how to respond. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. "I didn't expect to come here at all. My ship malfunctioned, and I ended up on your planet by accident." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are not here by accident. You were meant to be here." The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. What did she mean? Was this some sort of trick? Why did she speak as if his arrival was more than random chance? Before he could speak, the woman who had escorted him into the palace stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she began, "he is the one." The Queen's expression darkened, and she nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving Jake. "Yes, he is the one. The prophecy has come to pass." Jake's mind whirled. Prophecy? What prophecy? He was a simple explorer, not a man destined for greatness, or at least he never thought he was. He opened his mouth to ask more questions, but before he could, the Queen stood and motioned for him to approach. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing toward the large, intricately carved chair in front of her. Jake hesitated but obeyed, his heart racing. The Queen finally spoke again, her voice low. "We have waited for you for centuries. You are the one who will either save us or destroy us. But I must warn you, human, your arrival brings with it a heavy burden." Jake was speechless, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. What had he gotten himself into? How was it possible that a simple explorer like him had become the key to an entire planet's fate? The tension in the room was unbearable, and Jake could feel his world shifting beneath him. There was no turning back now. Whatever the Queen's prophecy was, he was bound to it. And it was clear that his life, his future, was about to change in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Jake sat in stunned silence, the weight of the Queen's words pressing down on him like an invisible force. The room around him felt suddenly smaller, as if the very air had thickened with the gravity of the situation. He had always thought of himself as a simple explorer, someone who studied alien worlds for a living. But now, sitting before the ruler of an entire planet, he couldn't help but feel insignificant. Yet the Queen's words lingered in his mind. "You are the one who will either save us or destroy us." The Queen stared at him, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Her expression was unreadable, but Jake could feel the weight of centuries of expectation in her gaze. She had waited for him. For him. "Prophecy," Jake finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. "What prophecy are you talking about?" The Queen did not answer right away. Instead, she stood and paced slowly around the room, her robe trailing behind her like a shadow. Every step she took seemed calculated, as if she was preparing for something important. Jake could see her internal struggle, the conflict between revealing too much and protecting the secret that had burdened her for so long. After what felt like an eternity, the Queen stopped and turned to face him. "The prophecy of the lost one," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with both awe and fear. "Long ago, before my reign, our people made a pact with humans. It was a time of great unrest, and both our species were on the brink of destruction. But in the midst of that chaos, a promise was made, a promise that one day, a human would come to our world, and with him, the fate of my people would be sealed. Jake's brow furrowed as he tried to comprehend what she was saying. "You're telling me that your people knew about humans long before my arrival?" "Yes," she replied, her eyes distant, as if she was seeing something from long ago. "The pact was not a simple one. We shared knowledge, technology, and strength, but it came at a cost. The prophecy stated that one day a human would arrive. And when he did, the future of both our species would depend on him." Jake stood, suddenly feeling the weight of the conversation. "But why me? I'm just one man. I don't have any special abilities. I don't even understand why I'm here." He couldn't hide the confusion in his voice. He had been expecting adventure, maybe danger. But this was something else entirely. The Queen looked at him intently, her gaze piercing. "You are more than you realize, human. Your kind's ability to adapt, to survive, and to rise above challenges. It is unlike anything we've ever seen. My people, for all our strength, lack what you possess. Resilience. We've relied too long on power, on domination. We have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight for survival. That is where you come in. The prophecy says that you, a human, will bring that strength back to us. But there is a price, and that price is not one that can be paid easily." Jake felt his pulse quicken. "What price?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. The Queen sighed, a deep, mournful sound. She stepped closer, her voice growing softer. "The price is the very thing that has kept us from achieving true peace. My people, despite all our advancements, are divided. We are bound by traditions and old ways that have caused nothing but strife and ruin. The prophecy foretells that only by embracing the human, by embracing your spirit, can we unify. But the cost of this unity is the destruction of our current way of life. To accept you, to accept what you represent, will tear apart everything we have built. My people are not ready for this." Jake's mind spun. He had never imagined his arrival would have such consequences. He had come to explore, to make discoveries, not to change the course of an entire civilization's history. "So, you want me to help your people unite, and that will somehow save you?" The Queen nodded solemnly. "Yes, but it is not so simple. There are factions within my kingdom who would see this prophecy fail. They believe that our way of life is sacred and should not be changed. They will not accept you, no matter what I say. There will be opposition, and it will be fierce." Jake's heart pounded as he tried to process everything. He had always been told that history was shaped by the choices of the few. But now he realized that he might be one of those few. His presence on this planet could either bring salvation or destruction to an entire civilization. The Queen watched him closely, as if waiting for him to understand. "This is why I froze when I first saw you. I feared the burden you would bring. For so long, I've tried to protect my people, to maintain our traditions. But now, I see that your arrival is inevitable. You are the key to our future, and I cannot deny that." Jake's thoughts were a whirlwind. He had been sent on a simple mission, to map uncharted space. But now he was caught in a web of ancient prophecies, power struggles, and a future that was no longer his own. "But why me?" he asked again, his voice filled with frustration. "I'm just one man. I have no power here. No reason to be part of this prophecy." The Queen stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. "It is not your power that makes you special. It is your humanity, your ability to change, to adapt, and to inspire. That is what we have lost. And that is what we need." Jake took a deep breath, his mind still racing. The weight of her words settled on his shoulders like an anchor. He hadn't come here to lead a revolution or unite an alien race. But it seemed that the galaxy had other plans for him. For the first time since arriving, Jake looked at the Queen and saw not just a ruler, but a woman burdened with responsibility and fear. She was as trapped in the prophecy as he was. And now, it seemed, they would have to face it together. Jake sat in the Queen's chambers, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on him. He had always believed in adventure and discovery, but this This was beyond anything he had imagined. The idea that he was somehow tied to an ancient prophecy, one that could either save or destroy an entire alien race, was overwhelming. How could he, one human, possibly be the key to such a monumental change? He rubbed his temples, trying to clear his mind. The Queen's words echoed in his head. You are the key to our future. He wasn't a warrior or a leader. He was just a man who had wandered too far from Earth. Yet here he was, caught up in a struggle that stretched back centuries. The Queen had left him alone for now, retreating into another part of the palace, giving him time to think. Jake needed answers, answers that were buried in the history of the alien world. He needed to understand why his arrival had such a profound impact on the Queen and her people. What was this prophecy, and why was he part of it? He stood up, pacing the room. The walls were adorned with intricate symbols, some of which seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. There were no windows, only strange light fixtures that gave the room a soft, eerie glow. Everything about this place felt ancient, as if it held centuries of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Jake's eyes landed on a massive stone tablet near the far wall, covered in symbols he didn't recognize. It wasn't just a piece of artwork, it was a record. His instincts as an explorer kicked in. If he could decipher what was on that tablet, perhaps he would find the answers he was looking for. He approached it carefully, running his fingers lightly over the stone surface. The symbols were strange, but there was a pattern to them. Some looked like they represented concepts, symbols for power, unity, and destruction. Others seemed to depict beings, perhaps gods or ancestors. It was clear that the language was old, but Jake had a knack for reading alien scripts. It was a skill he had developed over years of study. He pulled out a small device from his jacket, a translator he had built himself, and pointed it at the tablet. A soft hum filled the air as the device scanned the symbols. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to give him a rough translation. The words appeared on the small screen of his device. When the lost one returns, so too shall the reckoning. A choice must be made. The people will rise or fall, and the prophecy will either be fulfilled or shattered. Only the strength of the human will decide our fate. Jake's heart raced. The lost one must have been him, the human the prophecy spoke of. But what did it mean by reckoning? What choice did he have to make? He pressed his hands to his face, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. The words were both terrifying and inspiring. His arrival here wasn't just a mistake. It was something his ancestors had predicted long ago, something that could either save or doom the Queen's people. Suddenly, the door to the chamber opened, and the Queen entered. She regarded Jake with a mixture of weariness and determination in her eyes. He could see that she was deep in thought as well, her shoulders stiff with the burden of leadership. "You have seen the tablet," she said softly. It wasn't a question but a statement. Jake nodded. "Yes, it speaks of a choice, a reckoning. I don't understand. What exactly am I supposed to do? I'm just one man. How can I be the key to saving your entire civilization?" The Queen stepped closer, her expression shifting to one of sadness. "It is not just you, human. It is the spirit of humanity that the prophecy speaks of. Your people have faced unimaginable trials, yet you have survived. You adapt, you evolve, you fight. It is this strength that our people have lost. We have relied too long on our power, on our technology, but we have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight for survival. You, the human, will remind us." Jake's mind was spinning. "But you said there was a price. You said that embracing this prophecy would tear your people apart. How can I unite your people when there are factions who don't even want this change?" The Queen's face darkened. "That is the reckoning. There are those among my people who will resist this change. They believe that our traditions are sacred, that we should not bow to any human, even one as powerful as you are meant to be. There will be war. We cannot avoid it." Jake clenched his fists, frustration boiling inside him. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't chosen to be a part of their prophecy. But he was here now, and there was no turning back. The queen was right. Her people were fractured. If he was to help them, he would have to do something he had never imagined. Lead. Then what do I do? Jake asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. How do I help your people unite when they're so divided? The queen studied him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. You will lead, human. You will show them what it means to fight for something greater than themselves. You will teach them that unity is not just a choice, it is a necessity. And in the end, you will decide whether our people survive or perish. Jake took a deep breath. He wasn't ready for this, not by a long shot. But the queen was right about one thing. There was no going back now. His presence here was part of something much larger than himself, and he had to find a way to accept it. He stood tall, meeting the queen's gaze. Then I'll do whatever it takes. I may not have the power of your people, but I know how to fight. And if there's any chance I can help you, help your people, then I won't back down. The queen nodded slowly, her expression softening just slightly. We may not have chosen you, human, but I am glad that you are here. Jake didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since his ship had crashed on this strange planet, he felt a spark of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but he wasn't alone. The queen had shown him that much. And for now, that was enough. The days that followed Jake's discovery of the prophecy were filled with uncertainty. He had come to this alien world expecting adventure and exploration. But now he found himself tangled in a web of ancient traditions, prophecies, and politics that he could hardly understand. The weight of the queen's expectations weighed heavily on him, and with each passing day, he felt the pressure growing. The queen had granted him access to her inner circle, allowing him to speak with her advisors and learn more about the state of her people. The more he learned, the more complex the situation became. There were factions within her kingdom, some eager to embrace the changes Jake's arrival promised, others fiercely resistant to it. The deeper Jake dug, the more he realized that his role in this prophecy was not just about saving the queen's people, it was about reshaping their entire way of life. One evening, after another long day of meetings with the Queen's Council, Jake found himself once again alone in the Queen's private chambers. He was lost in thought, staring out of the small window at the vast, star-filled sky, when the sound of the door opening interrupted his musings. He turned to see the Queen standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "May I speak with you, human?" she asked, her voice softer than it had ever been. Jake nodded, surprised by the change in her tone. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The queen moved toward the center of the room, her long robe flowing behind her. Her usual regal composure was replaced with an air of exhaustion, as though the weight of the prophecy and the burden of leadership were taking their toll on her. "I have not been entirely honest with you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, her eyes dark with something Jake couldn't quite place. "There is something more to this prophecy, something that I have kept from you. It is not just about uniting my people. It is about saving them from ourselves." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" The queen hesitated, looking down at her hands as if searching for the right words. "For centuries, my people have been divided. The prophecy speaks of unity, yes, but it also speaks of destruction. A great destruction that will come if we do not change. The factions within my kingdom do not just oppose the idea of you, of humanity. They oppose change itself. They fear what you represent." Jake took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. "And what do I represent exactly? I'm just a human explorer. I don't see how I could be the cause of all this fear." The queen's eyes flickered with something akin to regret. "You represent everything that we have forgotten. Hope, resilience, the ability to overcome. My people, my ancestors, built this empire on strength and control. We have long relied on our power and our technology to maintain order. But over time, we have grown weak. We have become complacent. And now the prophecy tells us that only through you, through a human, can we find a way to save ourselves. Jake shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around everything. But if your people are so divided, how can you ever unite them? How can I help when they're all so set in their ways? The queen looked at him with a deep sadness in her eyes. That is the challenge I have faced my entire life. I have tried to rule with wisdom and strength, but the divisions within my people are too great. And now I fear that it may be too late to change their hearts. But you, human, you are not bound by our history, our traditions. You can do what I cannot. You can show them what true unity means. Jake felt a mixture of guilt and confusion. He had never asked for this responsibility. He had never asked to be the one who would change the fate of an entire civilization. And yet, here he was, caught in a struggle that he didn't fully understand. But there was something about the queen's words, something about her honesty, that made him feel as though he could help. "You're asking me to lead," Jake said slowly, his voice heavy with realization. "To show your people what unity really means. But how can I lead them when I'm not even part of their world? I don't understand their ways, their traditions. I'm just a man." The queen's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him. "You are more than just a man. You have something that we have lost: hope. It is the most powerful weapon any civilization can possess, but it is also the most fragile. That is why I have kept you at a distance, why I have not told you everything. I was afraid." "Afraid?" Jake echoed, his confusion deepening. The queen nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that you would leave. Afraid that you would see how broken we are, and walk away. But I realize now that we cannot afford to be afraid anymore. We are on the brink of destruction, and you are the only chance we have. You are the one who will either save us or let us fall." Jake stood still, processing her words. The responsibility that had been thrust upon him felt even heavier now. He had never expected to be a leader, especially not in a situation as dire as this. But he couldn't ignore the queen's plea. He couldn't walk away now, not when so much was at stake. "I'll do what I can," he said finally, his voice steady despite the uncertainty inside. "But you have to trust me. I don't know how to unite your people, but I'll try." The queen smiled faintly, the first true smile Jake had seen from her. "That is all I can ask. Together, we may have a chance." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of determination begin to settle within him. The path ahead was unclear, filled with challenges and danger, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when an entire world's future was on the line. The days passed in a blur as Jake continued to adjust to life on the alien world. The weight of the prophecy, the queen's trust, and the divided factions within her kingdom all loomed over him. Every decision felt monumental, and Jake found himself questioning every move he made. He had come here with no real purpose other than exploration, but now he was caught in a struggle that would determine the fate of an entire civilization. The queen had kept him close, involving him in her council meetings, where she laid out the challenges her people faced. She spoke of the different factions, those who believed in maintaining the old ways, the traditionalists who clung to their power and status, and the reformers, those who saw the need for change and embraced the possibility of uniting with humans to build a better future. It was clear that the queen was torn between these two groups, each pulling her in a different direction. Jake, for his part, felt out of place. He wasn't a diplomat, nor a warrior. He was just one man, a human, with no experience in the kind of politics and power struggles that shaped this alien world. But as much as he struggled with doubt, he couldn't shake the sense that he had a purpose here. The prophecy, the queen's trust in him, all pointed to something bigger than himself. He had to step up, even if he didn't know how. One morning, the queen summoned him to her private chamber again. She looked tired, her eyes heavy with the weight of leadership, but there was a new sense of resolve in her posture. The walls of the room were bathed in the soft glow of the twin suns outside, casting a golden light that made the room feel almost dreamlike. It was a stark contrast to the tension in the air. "Jake," the Queen greeted him, her voice steady. "We need to talk." He nodded, stepping forward. "About the council, the factions." The Queen's gaze softened, but there was no hint of hesitation in her voice. "Yes, and more. I've made my decision." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You've made a decision. About what?" She took a deep breath, then looked him squarely in the eye. "I am going to support the reforms. I'm going to push for unity, for change. And I'm going to trust you to help lead us through this." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it out loud made it all feel so real. The Queen was placing her faith in him, faith he hadn't asked for, but was now bound to. It was a lot to take in, but it was also a challenge he couldn't refuse. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice serious. "The traditionalists won't just accept this. They'll fight back." "I know," the Queen replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "But I can't let fear hold us back any longer. The old ways have failed us. My people have stagnated. We need to embrace change, and we need to do it now. The future of my kingdom depends on it." Jake could see the fire in her eyes. Despite the uncertainty, despite the opposition she knew she would face, she was resolute. It wasn't just about winning a political battle. It was about saving her people from a future of division and decline. "So, what's the plan?" Jake asked, feeling a surge of purpose. The Queen walked over to a large table at the center of the room, where a map of the kingdom had been laid out. She pointed to various regions, each marked with symbols representing different factions. "The traditionalists hold power in these regions," she explained, tracing her fingers over the map. "They have the support of the military and the elite class. The reformers, those who want change, are scattered but growing in influence. I believe we can win them over if we can show them that unity is the only way forward." Jake studied the map, his mind racing. "So we need to rally the reformers and weaken the traditionalists." "Exactly," the Queen said, her voice firm. "But it won't be easy. The traditionalists will do everything they can to stop us. We'll need to convince the people that the old ways no longer work, that they need to stand with us if they want a future. We'll need to show strength and unity, something the factions can't ignore." Jake felt the weight of the task ahead, but he also felt something else, a sense of clarity. For the first time since arriving on this planet, he understood what needed to be done. The Queen had placed her trust in him, and now he had to prove that he was worthy of it. "Where do we start?" he asked, his voice resolute. The Queen's eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude in them. "We start by uniting the reformers. We'll give them hope, show them that change is possible. Once we have their support, we'll move on to the military. If we can gain their loyalty, we'll be able to challenge the traditionalists and force them to the table." Jake nodded. "And if the traditionalists refuse to negotiate?" The Queen's expression hardened. "Then we will have no choice but to confront them directly. But I want to avoid bloodshed if we can. We need to show them that this is not a war. It is a chance for peace, for a better future." Jake looked at her, feeling the weight of the decision before him. The Queen was asking him to help lead this revolution, this shift in power. It was no longer just about exploring new worlds or making discoveries. It was about standing up for what was right, for what would ensure the survival of a civilization that was on the brink of collapse. "Let's do it," Jake said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll help you lead your people, Queen. We'll show them that unity is the way forward." A small smile curved the Queen's lips. "Thank you, Jake. You've given me hope. Now we will give hope to my people." Jake didn't know if they could succeed. The challenges ahead were enormous, and the risk of failure was high. But for the first time since landing on this alien world, he felt ready. He had found his purpose, and with the Queen by his side, he was determined to see it through. The tension in the palace was palpable. Jake stood in a quiet corner of the war room, looking at the map of the kingdom laid out before him. The Queen's plan was bold, but the risks were high. The traditionalists had a firm grip on power, and they would not give it up easily. Yet, as Jake had come to understand over the last few weeks, this wasn't just about power, it was about survival. The Queen and her people had been stuck in an endless cycle of control, and change was their only hope. The reformers, the ones who believed in unity, had been cautiously coming together under the Queen's leadership. They had not yet committed fully to the cause, but Jake could feel the shifting tides. The Queen's vision for the future was powerful, and it was starting to take root. However, convincing the military to side with them was the real challenge. If they didn't win the loyalty of the soldiers, their efforts would be in vain. Jake, a voice interrupted his thoughts. The Queen had entered the room, her expression as determined as ever. Her usual royal composure was now mixed with the weight of responsibility. She had taken on more than she ever expected, but now her plan was beginning to unfold. Jake turned to face her, his gaze filled with questions. How are we moving forward? Are the reformers ready to act? The Queen nodded, her eyes scanning the map before her. We've gathered their support. It's not unanimous, but it's a strong enough foundation. The people are beginning to believe that unity is the key to survival. However, we cannot afford to waste time. The traditionalists will not sit idly by. Jake's heart quickened. He knew what the Queen meant. The traditionalists would fight back fiercely. Their resistance would not be passive. We can't waste any time. How do we reach the military? They hold the power on the ground. The Queen's expression turned grim. I've already sent word to a few trusted generals, but the rest of the military is loyal to the old ways. We need to appeal to their sense of duty, their loyalty to our people, not just to the old regime. I'm counting on you, Jake, to help me convince them. Jake felt a surge of responsibility. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't have the political influence the Queen did, but he understood people. He understood what drove them. He could help her convince the military leaders, but it wouldn't be easy. The challenge was not just about loyalty. It was about showing them a new way forward, one where they didn't have to fight to keep their power, but where they could fight for something greater than themselves. We need to show them what the future could look like, Jake said slowly. A future where they're not just pawns in a power struggle. They need to see that this isn't just about you or me. It's about all of us. The Queen nodded. Exactly. We must make them understand that unity is the only path forward, or we will all fall into chaos. If the military sides with the reformers, the traditionalists will have no choice but to come to the table. Jake took a deep breath. Then we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to convince them. The Queen's eyes softened for a moment, her gaze resting on him. I never expected you to be such a leader, Jake. You have a way of seeing the bigger picture, of understanding the hearts of those around you. Jake felt a weight on his shoulders, but he couldn't let it show. I'm just doing what needs to be done. I didn't come here to be a leader, but I'm not going to walk away now. You're right. This is bigger than both of us. The Queen's face hardened again, her royal mask slipping back into place. Then let's make sure we win. We have one shot at this. We can't afford failure. The time had come to act. Jake and the Queen set out to meet with the military leaders, the tension in the air thick with the uncertainty of what was to come. The soldiers who had once fought for the old regime now had to decide where their loyalty truly lay, with tradition or with the future. Jake's heart raced as they entered the military headquarters. He could see the generals gathered around a large table, speaking in low tones. The room was heavy with the weight of their presence, and for a moment, Jake felt out of place. These were the people who controlled the kingdom's strength. Their loyalty was everything. The Queen stood tall, her regal presence filling the room. Generals, she said, her voice steady but filled with authority. I've called you here to discuss the future of our kingdom. We stand at a crossroads, and the time has come for us to choose. We can continue down the path of division, or we can unite and build a future together." Jake stood beside her, his eyes scanning the room. He could see the skepticism in some of the general's eyes, but there was also a flicker of curiosity. He stepped forward, speaking in a calm, measured tone. "The choice is yours. The reformers are ready to stand with you, but we need your support, your loyalty. We need you to fight for unity, not power." The generals exchanged glances, the silence thick with tension. Finally, one of them, a grizzled older man, stood up. "And what exactly do you offer us, Queen?" "A world where we no longer hold control, where our traditions are swept away by a foreign influence." The Queen's gaze never wavered. "What I offer is a chance to rebuild, to stand together, stronger than before. We can no longer afford to cling to the past. The future is for those who are willing to change." Jake stepped forward, his voice stronger now. "The future isn't about power. It's about survival. If we don't change, we'll fall, just like every other empire that refused to adapt." The room fell silent once more. The generals exchanged looks, the weight of the decision pressing on them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the older general nodded slowly. "We will support you," he said, his voice firm. "But know this, Queen. If this fails, it will be on your shoulders." The Queen nodded. "I accept that, but we will not fail. Together, we will rise." The future of the kingdom was now in their hands. The battle for unity had begun, and Jake knew that whatever came next, they were ready. The Queen, once burdened with uncertainty, now stood as a beacon of hope. And Jake, though uncertain of what lay ahead, was no longer just a man caught in a prophecy. He was a leader, standing beside the Queen to reshape the fate of an entire world.